Well, I was the oldest, as you know, and then my brother, and then my sister. And I can remember specific things. I can't remember day to day to day, but I can tell you this: he was very good natured, and he was very content. And I remember one time when we went with our mother to a church circle, they called them that, and I can remember that I was busy investigating the entire house and actually got locked in a closet as a result of my wanderings. But he was sitting by my mother the entire time with a toothbrush. And he enjoyed that. And he never, whimpered or did anything. He was that was who he was, which it was so different from me. That's why I remember, I suppose. He was good natured. He was quiet. Uh, he didn't do anything destructive. He didn't take it out on any of us or anything like that. He's just a very sweet kid. I do remember one time, my father would go to New York periodically to check on businesses and stocks and things like that. And he'd come back, he always had a costume for each of us, if you can believe that. Mine was once a senorita's costume with the hoop skirt and the whole thing. And if I didn't think I was a nut. Well, one time he got a policeman's outfit, complete with billy club. And so I tormented him in some way. And so he's coming after me, this little thing waddling along. And I got myself into the bathroom and locked the door. And he pounded on the door with his billy club. And I sat in there laughing, fiendish older sister. And so when my mother came home, she wasn't there at that moment, when she came home and saw her dented door, my brother got a spanking, and I danced in the living room. I remember that. So fortunately, that isn't the way it all went through the years. But I remember that because he'd never done anything. He didn't do things like that. He was very patient and quiet and agreeable and colorless, But in those very, very early, it was hard to tell he was a genius at that point. But, who was looking? Well, I knew he was smart, but then we were all supposed to be smart. And um, I heard things about him when he was at college at, what's that one in Pennsylvania? At Wharton, yeah. And he had a roommate who was a friend of mine, had been my age. And the roommate said it was just driving him crazy because he studied all the time. When Warren would come in like 15 minutes before the exam and just ace his way through it. So we were really beginning to catch on at that point because he had so many interests. He owned a Rolls Royce in 1927 or something like that. And once he had a hearse, and my mother made him take it away because it was in front of our house, and we had a neighbor whose husband had just died, and she didn't think the hearse was too attractive. But he was always busy, or else he probably told you how he went in and got used golf balls that had gotten in the pond and nearly asphyxiated themselves. And he ran away from home once when he was in junior high, I think, up to somewhere in Pennsylvania. And they got him back. I don't remember conversations or anything about it, but it was very daring. And with the son of another congressman that we'd known in Fredericksburg. She had me terrified. And I know one time when he was interviewed, someone asked about that, and he said I couldn't do anything to help her, and he actually wept. So I got the brunt. I was the whipping boy, because I couldn't have been anything else. I was just, Mary Sunshine. And so it was dreadful to me, and he said I couldn't do anything to help her. And he really felt terrible about that. And he also thought it was a miracle I didn't end up in a mental institution because it was really tough, really tough. I hate to sound because I think it sounds whiny, but it was dramatic, and it went on all the time. Let's see. Oh, I know, when I'd wake up in the morning, I'd listen to hear her voice. I could tell by her voice it was going to be a terrible day or not, And then the next sound I heard was my father going through the front door to go to work. So he was exempt from all this and really didn't know it. I don't know, the three of us, my shrink said at one point, said, I can't believe that all three of you kids conspired not to tell your father. Well, I think we were terrified of her. I don't know what it was. I've tried to figure that out, but she made it really clear, and it was particularly clear Warren and my sister saved my life, I like to say, at one point because I was a dramatic teenager. And I'd gotten a letter from some boy, and I was just going to throw it in the fireplace. There was, unfortunately, a little fire going on in the fireplace. And the flames came up like this over the mantelpiece. And my mother and father were both gone. So we sat down and figured out what we're going to do to save my life. And so Bertie, I think, took the rap on that. So I'll always have to be grateful for that. I mean, once I remember as a kid, I was going to, pack up and take off. And I had a place I saw on the streetcar line, which said they'd rent rooms, and I thought, I'll move in there, and then I will, what do you do? Panhandle. That's what I was going to do. I must have been 8 or something like that. And so I said I was going to do that. She said, I'll help you pack. But it was cutting, and, if I had to choose between your children and Daddy, it'd be your father, She came from a home that was almost Dickensian. And her mother was really bad off. And my grandfather he was a superintendent of schools. And I remember because he always had a bear skin or something like that as he rode around in the winter, and no carriages yet, but no cars yet. And and at lunch they would come home, and he bought the newspaper. He left the school thing and bought a newspaper because he could be there all the time to watch over his wife. He adored her. And I remember they said that if she went away to California, she was okay there, but the minute she came back to West Point was a really competitive town. If you asked somebody for a recipe, they'd give it to you, but they'd alter it. So you never had the cookies or the whatever it was, never turned out as well as your neighbor. So she was English. Now this is just old-timey stuff because we're talking about 1910 or something like that. And the movement west, when they came as far as West Point, Cumming County, that was all English. The next town was German. And a lot of she was born in Bancroft, which was the English town, and when she moved to West Point, she was thrust in with all these tough, heavy ladies that wouldn't put up with anything. So Grandpa ran the paper, and at lunch they would do mental math. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? Yeah. When we lived in Washington, then she had migraines there steadily, and it was hard on her. She didn't want to live in Washington. Oh, but she'd always do it, Daddy. And he, of course, asked her before she signed up. I bet he did. But anyhow, he really wanted to go to Congress, and for his own wonderful, lofty reasons. And so she always covered for him, always made him 2 feet taller and, all that. Well, we recorded a song. I think it was Battle Hymn of the Republic, probably, because that was his and one of our bonds. We both loved that music. And I remember doing it. And Warren's been just sick ever since because somebody got rid of it. It just doesn't exist. Once we went to a church dinner, and there was an artist there, and she was going to pick out somebody from the audience, draw that person, give them what she'd done. And I couldn't believe it. She picked me. So I sat up to her and got the paper. When it came home, it later disappeared. She threw it away. And that went on for, numbers of times, but that's the one I remember the best because I was so tickled to think somebody had done this pastel portrait. Amazed, as a matter of fact. We were on the circuit. There were 5 counties, and we were a nice, wholesome-looking family, and behaved ourselves, and we're part of the team. His priorities were first his faith, second his marriage and children, I think, and the third one was and then making money, enough to live on and all that. So, I mean, he started a business down in South Omaha, which was for the South Omaha Feed Company or something. It's where the stockyards used to be. I remember when we were teenagers, we would go down there to talk to somebody on Saturday morning that worked there, and we were just rolling around because it smelled so bad in the stockyards, My father says, that's the smell of money, but, it's terrible. And so, he said that the fact that he had that income made it possible for him to run for Congress. And I don't know if Warren told you about the time when they had an election, which he won. And then they voted, Congress at that time, when they came back, they voted themselves a raise. I think maybe $15,000 was the sum total at that time. And he said, no, the voters of Nebraska did not put me in office at this higher rate. And so I'm going to turn the money back to the treasurer every month. And then if they decide to elect me next time at 15,000 or 17,500 or whatever it was, then I'll take it. Now, I don't think there was anybody else that did that. Now it's $100 and some $1,000 and nobody, and it's automatic, so they can escape it. He corrected me 3 times in my life that I could remember, and I deserved each one. But I was learning. And he was just, he would look at me in the rear vision mirror of the car, and that was a really big treat for me. But on the other hand, I don't believe they came to my graduation in high school. They may have, but there was just nothing made of anything like that, so. Oh, brilliant at math, yes. She could, I guess they still had these things where you cranked them and things added up, and she could add it in her head faster than the machine could do it. She was absolutely amazing in that. Oh, yes. I don't have any hesitation saying that. Of course he was. They all were. And then most of them, unless they were Lotharios, but they're all stumbling around in Woodrow Wilson High. And he and I met at a certain corner during classes. At some point, he never spoke, kept his head down like this. I don't know what that was all about, but my girlfriends would come with me, and they thought that was really funny. So he's always had that dexterity, both in his mind and the ping pong and all that stuff that he did. We all talked at the dinner table, and that was sort of a jovial time. But other than that, he was hidden behind a newspaper, my father was, or books. He read and read, and he listened to marches on the not the radio, but the phonograph player. And he and I had a special thing about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, so that was our meeting point. And I guess I'd have to say that it was before the time of family councils. We had one neighbor that did that, and we just yearned to have a family council where everybody got to speak, but they made fun of it. So that stopped a lot of things by making fun. I learned a lot of stuff, or heard a lot of stuff that I wish I'd never heard, because it was derogatory. It was questioning people's motives. And that you're just little ears listening to all this stuff going on. And I didn't realize that until maybe a few years back, that I had been filled up with a lot of propaganda or prejudice. And then you have it in your head, and then the rest of your life you spend stomping on it or something because it isn't right. But that's the way it was. We're all Democrats now, I'll tell you. Yeah, I think that's very interesting too. But it was, it was after we came back from Congress. I'd have to think a little bit about what opened it up, without going into the whole detail about Susie, which comes in it later. Well, my sister knew her better because they had a triplex or something at Northwestern, and I had never met her. And I don't even think I'd met her parents, but they were sort of the same general generation. And besides that, activities, I don't know what they were. But I just know this, that anybody asked me about Susie, I said she's the best thing that ever happened to our family. She really was. Best friend I ever had. Now, she and I had one of the tenets, or the basic things to our friendship, besides just liking each other and laughing a lot, was that we love music. And she wrote a letter to her mother, and I've got it somewhere, and she said, I had no idea that Dodo, loved music, but we were in New York, and we went to all these crazy places to hear the music. And when we were in Omaha, then later on, B.B. King came to town, and I had never heard B.B. King. But she had, and I think we were the only white people in an auditorium that seated 6,001, literally. So we went to town on that. That was That was a big thing. And then we also had a sort of running, not contest, but of greeting cards. We loved greeting cards, and they had to be perfect. Now, when I was in hospital later on in Maine with cancer, she sent me the queen of all cards. Well, there's one that's better than that, but this is a second. This comes in second. This guy's in his hospital bed, and he has a thing that holds cold water ice on his head, and it says, "I hear you're sick." And then you turn the page, and it says, "If you die, can have your stuff." Now, you can't send that to just anybody. And the card was sort of worn looking. She'd had it so long because there was nobody she knew that would laugh. And, of course, I did laugh. And so we had this thing. It just went on it was just as strong as it could be at any time. And we'd shop, and we could. Now, Warren said that the merchants would bring the stuff out on the sidewalks for us so we wouldn't miss anything. She did go to California, and I went out to visit her almost immediately. We really had a sister relationship. We trusted each other. I was learning every day from her. Every time she opened her mouth, I got a new point of view on things. She gave me the book Man's Search for Meaning, which became my Bible. I must have given away almost 100 of them. Now I'm going to give them to a whole new batch of people because I think it tells you that you have choices you can make even if you don't think you can. And so we had that in common. We loved that. I love that book. And then mainly we just enjoyed being in each other's company. We really did. As I said, that letter she wrote to her mother and said, "I didn't know Dodo was interested in these things," and it makes us. I saw a lot of them. They would come to New York and they'd invite me up, and I'd sleep with the living room of the corner suite of the plaza, and then Warren would do whatever he was doing, and we were out looking at the town, checking everything out. We never did not have something to say to each other. Love, acceptance, kindness, very smart, hope. No, she was very cool. She was, I don't mean cool, but I just mean centered, whatever people use as a word today. She, I think very early she knew I know her father said this, some form of this, that she ought to marry him. And she was in love with somebody at Northwestern at the time. And, but Warren noticed that her doc played the ukulele, so he got a ukulele, and they played together, and he just camped there until, between the two of them, she was very young, 19, 18, something like that, and never went back after the first year at Northwestern. And I can't tell you what her emotions were at that time, but there was some element of realizing that he was a special person. I don't want to misrepresent her because I have nothing but an admiration for her, total, period. That's it. But she was on the other side of this thing. She cared about people. That's what it was. And she took very good care of people, whether it was a black taxi driver woman. She went to when that woman was ill and in the hospital, and Susie went and visited her and read and all that kind of stuff. She had time for that. When my Aunt Alice had cancer, Susie came over every single morning and fixed her breakfast because she thought she'd get off to a good start that way. And this when she had little kids. She had help too, but I mean, still, that was her own idea, and it was a wonderful thing. Millions of examples like that. She just, he was just totally enamored of her, and why not? And she of him, in a different way, but the same degree. And her ideas on various subjects changed over the years, and so did his, and just kept up. But she had a whole different concept of herself as having a life than everybody else of our generation. You just didn't even think about it. But she wanted to sing. Yeah, and she said, I think what she said was, "I've spent 25 years with you, and I've loved every minute of her," words to that effect, "and now I've got to have something." The children are gone. They had all gone off to college. And he was just heartbroken. But that's what happened. And she became very active in San Francisco with the gay community. And she just had a big heart for it. She was just not judgmental. That's, and I was raised from the most judgmental place in the U.S. of A. We all three of us were, and it was softening him. Now, it didn't show all the time, and he missed the boat on a couple things as far as I was concerned. But that was that's what had been drummed into it. He was religious about not making negative statements. And I was trying to think, once we were at the dining room table, and he stopped himself. He was going to make one, and he caught himself and shut up. So, and she also, she didn't just encourage him on being a daddy. She forced him to be a daddy. And she said, anybody can be a father, but take special work. So we're going to go get on this overnight train, and we're going to go down to Florida, some Texas or someplace, so that he could be a daddy. And but he had a lot on his mind at the time. He was remarkable in his temperament, because I think he had the ideal temperament as well as the ideal brain power and strength of whatever it took, because he came to the top of the stairs and he had this sort of sick expression on his face, and he says, this was early. He says, we just lost $1 million. I think it was $1 million, but it wasn't 30 billion or something. And it seems that some lawyer had made a mistake, but he fixed it. He flew out to San Francisco and fixed it and came home. And that guy he thought was going to be on the Supreme Court, but we never heard about him again. So I don't think he was ever bitter, but he's able to cut people off, and it's over, members of the family even. And with her, he could have gone over the edge, but when she came into the field, she was the balancing force. When was she not sick? I mean, she had these problems with her migraine headaches. I remember once she went to some kind of party, and Susie got one because there was a wonderful chocolate dessert. We both adored chocolate. That was another very strong bond that kept us together through thick and thin. And so she thought she had to go home. She was sick. So she ate chocolate all the way because she figured she'd already done the damage. So there was a lot of whimsy. And we both found a drug. My dentist gave me this drug in a big quart jar like this. It was made Ambar, I think was the name of it. It made you have more pep. And we only each had 3 kids, and so on and so forth, but we needed more pep. And one time, she took the wrong one and I took the wrong one. So I was up and at 'em, and she was dozing off all day long. Just the opposite of what we needed. But we were really just like fun, serious, zany, enjoying each other's company. She didn't have the best health. We were used to, stout German, whatever it was. And she didn't have that. It was just overwhelming. Warren said, she's not going to make it. And, but she did through that period that I'm talking about. And then when they're in Wyoming, that's when she died. I think she had a stroke. Bono kissed me. That's what happened at that. He doesn't seem to remember. But anyhow, yeah, I did. It was heartbreaking. It was a killer. Various people spoke and had their say, and it was just sad. Yeah, I was up in Maine, and I had the TV on, and here come the 3 of them, and somebody interviewing them, and they're talking about what they're going to do. And I thought, well, that makes sense, because that's, to a degree anyhow, because Susie would want to see it, spread out and do some good. And they certainly didn't need any of it to live on. So, and then in about a week, it doesn't affect me, is what basically I'm saying that too. I never thought it would, but anyhow, I get this letter, and it's from a woman in Florida who's writing to him, and she had seen some more of this stuff on TV about the Gates and what he was doing. And so he sent me the letter and wrote on the top of it, Would you be interested in helping with this? So I called the 3 members of my very astute board, and I called Diane, and I said, Diane, I've got this letter. It tells about this and that, and do you think we ought to do this? And she said, I could see her pursing her lips, and she said, I don't think that's a very good idea because it'd be too hard on you. And so I said, well, thank you very much. And then the next morning we called and said, yeah, I'll take them. Well, the first letter we got was something like 200 to 400 letters, and it was like laying them out on your dining room, your living room floor, and then your den if you had one. And I didn't know what in the world I was going to do with it, but I knew that was the chance of a lifetime for me, because that's what I love to do. And so, so I called him back and said, yeah, we'll take them. And then he said, they were coming in at such a rapid rate. And the problems were so terrible, and we'd never done it. Nobody's ever done it the way we did it, and it's the most brilliant plan that ever came down the pike. It really works, and I'm so happy about that. That was the beginning of Sunshine Lady. So, well, we'd done a few things before, but this was big magnitude stuff. And so, let me think, what was the next thing? So he sent us these boxes, and then he said, I'm going to give you $5 million, but then he raised it to $10 million. And he said, take them over. So I'm not just bragging when I say it's the best. It is the best. And it's remarkable, but it was the right combination of people. And then we had a wonderful culture. They have a culture too it's at Berkshire Hathaway. But we were doing the same thing parallel. And so I had to find people to help me. And they put a notice in the Episcopal Church over in the next town, looking for people to read letters, because by that time we probably had 5,000 or something. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And then we developed a form that we used to find out if they were telling the truth, and we signed up for a place you wrote to. And the boys in the basement could check anybody out. So that was, what a bonus that was. And so we started in, and we have a book. We have a book that's yet to be written there, because we saved all the letters. And it was sad in the beginning. In this past summer, we started reading them to see if, with the idea of culling out some things for a book. And reading as fast as we could, developing the letter just as fast as we could, shoring up this, these points. And then, oh, darn it, I can't remember what's going on with this. I guess I'm trying to convince you that it was not a charity-minded lady deal, nor was it paying any money to any of us. And it's about 3 months ago I finally figured out I was working full-time for Warren and getting paid nothing. Oh, but anyhow, we have answered and dealt with over 22,000 letters. This is not a joke. This is not a little game for your little society people, because we aren't society people at all. We had high standards, and nobody was getting rich. And these women were we got them a phone and put it in their house, and that was their phone for the Sunshine Lady. And then we had a questionnaire as time went on. We promptly did this, but anyhow, to determine how much their income really was, what are they spending it on, and if they smoke, well, sorry, can't do that. I said, this is it's a collaborative effort. And if you're not willing to do your part, then, that's that. We're not either. We're not doing it because we got more than we don't need any more clients or anything like that. And it was remarkable how it worked. It was just dandy and very sensible and straight to it. And mainly we had to convince them that there was a collaboration. It wasn't a throwaway. Well, I think his legacy, first of all, is going to be integrity, because he just doesn't screw around or do crazy things, and he never talks bad about anybody, as I said to you. What did he say? Oh, yeah, once I told him about an editor of a magazine, and someone who was mad at me had gotten their secretary, to write a letter into National Review. And it was scathing. It was terrible. And my mother and father had been friends of the Buckleys. I had known them, but I mean, sort of adored each other, as a matter of fact. And so I wrote to him, and I wished he'd contact me first before or do a check on it or something. But anyway, that was all there was to it. So I was telling Warren about it, and he was sitting there, and his face was like the straight ahead. He said, "He'll want something someday." Oh, and so I stopped worrying about it. But, and then on one other person, this was an ex-husband, he said, because he'd really been bad, and he said, well, he will, let's see, he won't get anywhere or something. He was moving on. And I didn't ask why. And then Bertie called him and said, why did you say that? Because it sounded just like, oh, the mafioso or something. And the answer was, well, he knew people everywhere. So his days were numbered, you know. He won't. Well, it was kind of funny. But anyhow, he lived through it. There she was. My father was gone. They had this house belonged to her second husband, my mother's second husband, and he was out of it. He was Alzheimer's, although he didn't know that name at that time. And then he died, and that she could keep the house as long as she was going to live in it. But one day she went to the hospital for a checkup or something, and when she came home, they'd moved her out, and she was in an old folks' home, and out. We all came and took the stuff we wanted, and it was gone. And then, but they told her that Warren was worried about her safety. Oh, then it's all right. So that's how she went over there. I remember visiting her shortly before that, and I thought, God, the bathroom's dirty, and the kitchen is dirty, and this is not my mother at all. And so I was up there polishing, taking off the top of the refrigerator, and she came in, and she just, you get down from there. I mean, she was really mad. And I said, well, what are you going to do about the toilet, you know? And she said, it'll take care of itself. So obviously we weren't tracking too well, and it was a problem. So they saw it, they were there, and so that's when she went to the home. And I went several times to see her, but it was just the thing she'd come back to would be, you've got to admit that I gave you the best father in the country or in the world. Yeah. And she had about 6 things she could say that made sense and repeat them every time. And once we were in the restaurant, and she was going through, no, pardon me, that's true. She was going through the routine. But the thing was that she called Bertie, or Bertie called her rather, later on. And she's going through about 6 or 7 little things that we could predict, and we sure knew about them. And then she said, it's very strange to think I was once a functioning adult. Boom, something clicked. It was an amazing thing. So she was a good sport, of course, and she would do whatever wanted. If it made Warren happy and he didn't worry as much, that was the way it was. So, and she would always say, I'm in the best room, it always had to be, she was explaining that she was being well taken care of. So she died, and we went to the funeral, and can't think of much more than that. But a lot of her friends had died. Oh, I know, I went out there. I know what I was thinking of. And I said, well, where's your bridge group? Because she had about 17 of them, and she was a crack player. I don't know, she said. They just stopped happening, or something like that. And obviously they'd cut her off, and because she couldn't play bridge anymore. So, well, she'd always wanted to be a singer. First of all, that I can tell you. And she talked about it from time to time. And the big move in Omaha was we all went out to it, and Warren had sent flowers and so on to back her up. He always backed her, 100%, if that's what she wanted to do. Like she said when they were telling him about how she wanted to move out to California, she said, I've spent 25 years of my life, I don't know that she said making you happy, but I don't think she'd say that. But I've spent the first 25 years, first 25 growing up, this was with you, and now I really have to do something for myself. This is something I really, really want to do. So she did. And I was there in the hotel she moved into, because it had a beauty shop and a restaurant. It was sort of a residential hotel, and he phoned, and he said he was just coming to pieces. And she said, Dodo, I may have to go home. But he pulled himself together, and She said, and this is also typical, she said, I'll need $75,000 for Christmas presents. So that's the way it went.